Hello all of you, welcome to the GS Paper 2 discussion of the mains exam. And here we go with our first question. Or maybe before starting it, I'll tell you my analysis of this paper. GS Paper 2, as was on very expected lines, it may seem to be a bit lengthy for some, but that's why, because you are thinking too much on how to go about it, how to write about it. Let us see what all contents we have, and with gradual progression of this class, I'll tell you my more assessment about the paper. So the first question is the most significant achievement of modern law in India is constitutionalizing of environmental problems by Supreme Court. Discuss this statement with the help of relevant case laws. Let us try to understand this question. Question has an assumption. Question already assumes that constitutionalizing of environmental problems by Supreme Court is the most significant achievement of modern law. Now, here you have to support this statement with the help of relevant case laws. So, we all know that environmental concerns have become quite prominent in Supreme Court, as well as Supreme Court cases, Supreme Court's adjudications, the Green Tribunal, the Green Bench, so on and so forth. So from where it started, or was always judiciary like this? The answer is no. It all started with a famous case, Municipal Corporation, the Ratlam versus Vardi Chand. The Municipal Corporation, it's a continuation, Ratlam versus Vardi Chand case. This case is of 1980. Now, what happened here in this case, that Municipal Corporation refused or expressed its inability to provide clean environment to the people. Now, court was not very happy with this. Court instructed the Municipal Corporation to go about it and please come up with safe and sanitary condition, is what the court said, court ordered. So this was the starting of, you may say, that environmental problems for the first time. For the first time it happened that court was looking into all these things. And before this case, Ratlam case came, what was happening? Court was being mainly reactive, like citizens approach the court against each other, against the state, and courts adjudicate upon it. Now here what happened, for the first time, a proactive approach was witnessed by the court. A proactive approach of court was witnessed here. So this case actually set the ball rolling for all these constitutionalization of the environmental problems. A very landmark case it was, and it also emphasized the rights of people to live in a healthy environment. Now, as and when we progress here, the landmark MC Mehta case, you all must have studied about this MC Mehta case. This was in 1986, where right to life and right to life, like Article 21 talks about right to life. Now, it was stressed, Article 21 within its ambit includes right to clean environment. So for the first time, actually before also court has said that, but here very prominently in MC Mehta case, and this case became a landmark judgment of the court. MC Mehta filed a PIL in many other cases, including the Taj trapezium case that we shall also mention here. So right to live in pollution-free environment was recognized as a right here. Now, there was another landmark case in the Supreme Court, the Rural Litigation and Entitlement. Rural Litigation and Entitlement. This case was about the Dehradun Dehradun versus state of UP. This was situated in Dehradun versus the state of UP. This was in 1985. So we started with the first one, that was Vardi Chand case. We came to the MC Mehta. Here is the third case for you, rural litigation entitlement Dehradun versus the state of UP. So closure of the limestone quarries. The closure of limestone quarries ordered by the court here because they were leading to pollution. Now, again, court here emphasized that a pollution-free environment is the kind of right of every citizen. Now, there was this famous Tas trapezium case. MC Mehta filed a petition there, and roundabout in this Tas trapezium case, almost 290 industries. This was quite a famous one. More than 290 industries were instructed to go for relatively clean fuel. That clean fuel was natural gas. Now there was this Chhattisgarh mining case, the illegal mining case, where another lot, Chhattisgarh illegal mining case, where heavy fine was imposed. Heavy fine was imposed by the court on those industries which were on those mining firms which were into it, and this was also illegal. So court imposed a heavy fine on them. Now another famous one is here, the DTC, the switchover of DTC buses to the CNG. The pollution level in Delhi was rising rapidly. It was in 90s. And there was this, I'm reminded of the famous judge, Justice Kuldeep Singh. He is also known as Green Judge. He is famously known as Green Judge. So it was on his instruction that his order of Delhi High Court that DTC buses were converted to the CNG. CNG of all carbon fuels is the least pollutant during those times. Now Justice Kuldeep Singh was also there in this Tas trapezium case. He was on that bench which presided this case. Now subsequently, Article 21, the ambit of Article 21 you must have heard, Article 21 is known for the widest interpretation by the court. So right to life included right to live in a pollution-free environment. Now there is another constitutional backing in the, apart from Article 21, there is Article 48 in your DPSP. This concerns with the fundamental rights, part 3. Article 48, capital A actually. And what it says, it also says that state shall endeavor for providing a clean and safe environment to the citizens. So what happened after all these landmark cases, it started with that famous Vardi Chand case in 1980. Gradually, the court started taking interest in these pollution matters. Court developed a very proactive approach. There were a few judges who were very, very concerned about the environment, Justice Kuldeep Singh being one of them. And finally, now what has happened, Article 48, and we can also mention here Article 51G. This is there in the fundamental duties, Article 51A subclause G. This is there in the fundamental duties. So of late, court has been reading fundamental rights together with these two provisions. That simply means that court is trying to widen the ambit of fundamental rights. When the judges read together the provisions of 48 and 51AG with Article 21, that actually widens the ambit. Widens ambit of Article 21, that is your fundamental rights. So this has been the latest approach of the court, and because of this, courts have been able to spell out a fundamental right which is wholesome for the environment as a part of right to life. So this is how you should proceed here. You can start that Supreme Court has been successfully developing certain initiative which have kind of cumulated in making environmental law problems the most significant problems in contemporary times. And you can start with the first judgment, the Municipal Corporation, Ratlam versus Vadichan. Then you can move to that Dehradun case, the rural litigation and entitlement versus the state of UP. From there, the MC Mehta case. I've listed all of them, and then you can conclude with this remark. This will be a complete answer. Now, moving on to the question 2, the right of movement and residence. So, you know which article comes to your mind? 1D. 1D will be here. And the next thing is your 191E. Throughout the territory of India are freely available to the Indian citizens, but these rights are not absolute. Comment. I would say this is a rather easy question, one of the easiest question of this paper. There are some other such full toss as well, but this is one of the very easy question because all of you have studied these things, I'm sure, in details, all those who have appeared for the main exam. So this is in your part 3, fundamental rights. Now 191D is concerned with the movement and 191E is concerned with the residence. So you can write it here. You can start your question with this, that article 19. You can mention these articles and you must mention that these are for citizens, because article 19, the entitlements, the safeguards against article 19 are not for the aliens. Now, but these rights are not absolute. So what it promotes? It promotes freedom. Which kind of freedom? Freedom of movement and residence under these two respective article and subclauses. But no right is absolute. It's a very well-known fact that fundamental rights aren't absolute but qualified. So you need to write this in this answer, that fundamental rights are not absolute, they are qualified, which means there are reasonable restrictions are imposed on fundamental rights. Now, this is a true statement. Maybe the only exception is Article 17, the right to prohibition of untouchability, for which there may not be any qualification. Usually it is up to the state to frame the laws. But yeah, we can very well write this, and reasonable restrictions are imposed. So no fundamental right is absolute. The reasonable restriction on these two rights is found in the clause 5. It mentions the reasonable restriction. Now, whether that restriction is reasonable or not, that will be decided by the court. Anyways, we don't have to go into which restriction is reasonable and which one is not. We just have to mention that their constitutional protection is provided to right of movement and residence throughout the territory of India to every citizen of India. But nothing is absolute, no fundamental rights are absolute, they are qualified. 19 clause 5 imposes reasonable restrictions. This would be your first paragraph. Now, on what grounds? Reasonable restrictions on what grounds? The valid grounds for imposing reasonable restrictions. So there are many conditions. I'll just write those few pointers and you can very well understand and elaborate on it. The movement in tribal areas, Schedule 5, Schedule 6, this is for the protection of tribal interest. Then you have the inner line permit, which applies in 4 states through a presidential notification. Now it has been extended to the 4 states. I'm sure you all are aware of it. There can be restriction on the movement of prostitutes as held by the Supreme Court for to maintain public morality and health. So movement of prostitutes could be restricted on this ground, no less than the Supreme Court of India has said so. So this is one of the reasonable ground. Now there can be reasonable restriction on grounds of security, law and order issue. Curfew can be imposed if there is a tense situation, a law and order situation is prevailing anywhere. So all these things will come here, and you can also include this, the COVID-19, the latest example you can give, the lockdown, which was imposed because of a health emergency situation that we were facing. So all these are valid grounds for reasonable restriction, which you must mention. There is nothing more that is needed here. It's a very straightforward question. You are supposed to comment here. So this is the directive word here. It directs you to comment. So when comment is there, then you can mention all the things which you know about this particular provision. So these are the various things which have been mentioned here. This is the answer. Now the third question, to what extent in your opinion? So here your opinion is being sought. Has the decentralization of power in India changed the governance landscape at the grassroots? Let us try to understand this question first. It asks you to what extent, which means how much it has happened, to what level it has happened, to what level it has materialized, and your opinion has been sought. The decentralization of power in India changed the governance landscape at the grassroots. So governance landscape at the grassroots, how much it has changed through decentralization of power. So democratic decentralization, you can start. Again, it has a constitutional mandate in the form of Article 40 DPSP. And subsequently, in order to implement Article 40, we had the 73rd Amendment. 73rd plus 74th you can write, both of them will come here, Panchayat as well as the urban local bodies. Now, why it has been brought? What were the objectives behind bringing these constitutional amendments? The idea was democratic decentralization, that there should not be a overtly centralized form of administration that will be very, very difficult to manage, and also it will alienate the people at the grassroots. So has it happened, and if it has happened, to what extent it has happened, and how much it has affected the governance? So why it is needed? It is needed for people's participation. Like more people will be able to participate when the governance process includes them. Their views will be considered, and it will build more of, you can say, institutional capacity, to build institutional capacity at the grassroots. So these things will lead to what is called the change in landscape of governance. Now, many welfare-oriented provisions are here, like reservations are provided to SCs and STs in proportion to their population, while women will get at least 1/3. This is the constitutional mandate under 73rd Amendment. reservation in all these panchayats. Now, so these things have actually materialized. So yes, we can say that governance landscape at the grassroots has changed for the better. Has changed for the better. Now, to what extent? Which means you have to also say that what ought to be done. It's not perfect. No scheme in India or no mechanism works in a perfect way. Everyone has its own inherent limitation, and so does this grassroots governance. So what would you suggest here? You can very well say that there are suggestions and to improve grassroots governance. Like first paragraph you mentioned, you start from Article 40 DPSP constitutional mandate, then you move to the 73rd and 74th amendment, mention the features which would include the people living in villages and in some small towns which are governed by the municipality, how it will bring more people into the daily administration. You mention all these points. You can also mention here that during COVID-19, the panchayats in some states, especially in some southern states and even in northeast of India, that panchayats were helping the state government in maintaining that quarantine measures were taken in a good way with whatever limited resources the panchayats had. They tried their best to do the needful. So yes, they are doing their work well, and you can connect it with because it asks about governance. So connect this with governance, that even for social audit, this would be a very good point, that even for social audit, panchayats are involved. You can give an example that Manrega was the first scheme which mandated social audit by the panchayats. So you see grassroots governance being implemented in letter and spirit. Now, what more we can do? We can point out the anomalies that despite all the efforts, what has happened because of the decentralization of power, we have often witnessed political and administrative apathy, that at times they are not very keen on it. They are not very keen on going for or giving the required power to the decentralization. The devolution of power has not happened the way it should have happened. And of course, there is a lack of funds. Panchayats often suffered from this. Then many times Gram Sabha is not taken into consideration. So these are the things which kind of put brakes on the performance of what is called changing the governance landscape at the grassroots level. All these points can be included to better it, how to go for better implementation of grassroots governance. You can mention these all points. So this would be a full answer to this, a good answer also. Now, second, fourth question, again, it would be a quite easy one because this is a direct question which all of us study during your course of preparation. This is found in the, even any polity book you pick up, this thing is there. The role of Vice President of India as the Chairman of Rajya Sabha. So you start with, again, with the constitutional mandate that Article 64 says Vice President of India would be the Chairman of Rajya Sabha, the ex officio Chairman of Rajya Sabha. I am sure you know the meaning of this word. By virtue of being into one position, one becomes one is there on the other position as well. So Vice President of India is the ex officio Chairperson of the Rajya Sabha. Now, what is his role? Here again, you have to mention in the same line that he is not a member of Rajya Sabha, and try to be a bit, just a little bit comparative over here. So you can write in bracket, unlike Speaker of Lok Sabha. See what this question says. Discuss. Discuss has ample scope. Just pour in your knowledge. Whatever you know, put in here related to the context. What is the role of Vice President as the Chairman of Rajya Sabha? So we start with this article that this is what says ex officio Chairman of Rajya Sabha will be the Vice President. Continue in the next line, he is not a member of Rajya Sabha, unlike Speaker of Lok Sabha. And he will not vote, he has a casting vote. Casting vote in case of tie. Now, he being the presiding officer or the chairman of Rajya Sabha, what are the powers that he has? What is the role that he performs? So, he is the interpreter of Constitution plus rules of procedure of the House. Both of them you have to write here. He is the final word on the rules of procedure of the House. Both houses have their own rules of procedure. They have separate books for it. We are not supposed to read that. That's not for your exam. So he is the one who takes the final call on what is the interpretation of rules of procedure of Rajya Sabha as well as the Indian Constitution related to anything which concerns the working of Rajya Sabha. Now, you can carry on and say that he is the one who will conduct the procedure. He is the one who conducts the procedures of the House, like whether what is the agenda of the House, when will the voting happen. He also adjourns the House. He can also very well adjourn the House. All these are his powers. He will decide which vote will happen through a voice vote, where there will be only a show of hands through a voice vote or an actual voting. It is the call of the presiding officer. He can take disciplinary action because this was in news. Suspends MPs. Many of them have been suspended, more than a dozen of late, by the chair of the Rajya Sabha. So he can very well send them out of the House. He will also adjourn House. Here you can write he can allow the motions, various type of motions to conduct the normal business of Rajya Sabha, and he also controls the secretariat. Earlier, Rajya Sabha TV was also under the Vice President, but now they have been merged into the Sansad TV. One limitation you can write here that he cannot preside over the joint sitting. It is always the Lok Sabha Speaker who will do that. So he is a connecting link. He is a connecting link between the center and the states. Now, why are we writing this, that he is the connecting link between the center and the state? Because Rajya Sabha is nothing but the council of the states. You all must know it, and I'm sure you do, that the MPs of Rajya Sabha are elected by MLAs. Every state has a fixed quota in Rajya Sabha. Out of those 245 seats, every state has a fixed numbers, like UP has 31 seats, Delhi has 3 seats. So it is the MLAs who decide who will be the Rajya Sabha MP from their respective state numbers. So that is why it is often any new All India services, it will be brought only when Rajya Sabha passes a resolution to that effect. Because a creation of 4th All India service will certainly impact the federal structure of India. Today we have 3 All India services. The creation of 4th one, whether it will be good or bad, that remains to be seen, but it will definitely impact the federal structure of India. So it cannot be done without the consent of Rajya Sabha. That's why we are saying it is a connecting link between the center and states. The MLAs send representative to Rajya Sabha. So Rajya Sabha MPs have states' interest in as their primary concern. Now, regarding this disciplinary action, there was some controversy on it, that whether it was the right thing to do or not. So you can add one line here that Rajya Sabha chairperson can, or you can say this like this, what he did cannot be questioned in a court of law, but he must preside over it. Or I can just write it again, that as chairman, he can preside over the house. You can write this line and not lord over it. Okay, not lord over it. That means do not behave as it. They are also MPs who are sitting there. They have been indirectly elected, but they are legislators. So this one you can write because this thing was very much question. So it's a very easy and a direct question. All these points you write, where you have written that disciplinary action stuff, there you can add this. Now, moving on to the next question. The role of NCBC, National Commission for Backward Classes, in the wake of its transformation from a statutory body to a constitutional body. So earlier NCBC was a statutory body. Statutory means it was established by a statute, by a law. But post 102nd Amendment, it has become a constitutional body. So any day constitutional body is more powerful than the statutory body. It inserted Article 338B in the Indian Constitution. You need to write these things. That is how the question will be complete. Your answer would be complete. So 338B was inserted through 102nd Amendment, which also accorded constitutional status to an already existing statutory status which NCBC had. Already existing statutory body was upgraded. So this 102nd Amendment upgraded it from statutory to constitutional. Now, what are the functions, and discuss the role. Again, discuss has been asked here, which you can write all the things which this NCBC can do. And remember, it's a 10-mark question. Question 1 to 10 are of 10 marks. And we have to answer it in 150 words, which means there may be some question where you know a lot, but you have to restrict yourself because you might miss other questions if you do not stick to the time limit. And it's never advisable to exceed the word limit. That gives a very bad impression to the examiner. So as Shakespeare would say, that brevity is the soul of wit. So please answer to the point. So that's what we are noting down, all these points I'm writing here. This is what is needed, all that are needed. Now, what can NCBC do here? Now, it has 102nd Amendment has been passed. Article 338B has been inserted in the Constitution of India. From statutory, NCBC has turned into constitutional body. This is your first two line. Now, change the paragraph and come to the demand of the question, to discuss the role. So, what is the role of NCBC? Role of NCBC you have to mention here. So, point wise you can mention all those roles. You know these things: to investigate and monitor safeguards regarding the welfare of socially and educationally backward classes, SEBCs. Okay, to investigate, monitor into all these safeguards, and also inquire into the complaints. Inquire into the complaints that relates to the SEBCs, the socially and educationally backward classes of people. To investigate, monitor, safeguard for SEBCs will be done at both levels, for the center as well as for the state. So this will actually recommend safeguards to both center as well as the state. Now, what else you can write here? That NCBC will advise the government. Advise here means both states plus center regarding the welfare measures for the backward classes. Again, same. For the backward classes, NCBC will of course send some recommendation to the center as well as to the state governments. Now, what happens when a body turns into constitutional body? Apart from the upgradation of status, because that is what the question says. Role of NCBC, all these things you can mention. But read the question again. Role of NCBC in the wake of its transformation from statutory to constitutional. So after this, you again change the paragraph and you write that as a constitutional body, because this was not something which happened before 102nd Amendment. So as a constitutional body, it will send a report. A report to whom? To the President of India. What would President do with that report? He will place it in front of, he will table it in Parliament. Parliament will discuss that report. Okay. So this is the benefit of being a constitutional body. Once a year, or maybe as and when if it's needed, it can be for more than once a year also. So they will send report to the president and president will table it in front of the parliament. Now, another thing that backward classes, they need both reservation and development. Both things are required. That will actually enable the backward classes. Only reservations not, but also the kind of development that is needed. That there has been a deprivation for backward classes, that is why reservation is there, and of course simultaneously development also needs to be taken care of. So first thing which has happened after the 102nd Amendment. Now this is the second thing, that both it will work both for reservation as well as for the development. The third thing that you can add here, that grievance redressal would happen. The grievance redressal for the backward classes would also happen, which was not earlier happening because of NCBC being a statutory body. So this is how you conclude your answer. That the new thing which will happen here, and you can, after all these 3 points, you can write a concluding line. Now, no need to write conclusion and then write your line. No, don't do that. Just write one line, that NCBC can uplift the status of the socially and educationally backward classes. End it on a good note, something like it will look into the matters which pertain specifically regarding the denial of rights of the backward classes, and backward classes will be more mainstreamed when NCBC starts implementing all these things together with the governments. So this is how you write this answer. This would be the complete answer. Moving on to the next, the sixth question. The Gati Shakti Yojana, you know, this was announced by PM in his 15th August speech of 2021 from the ramparts of Red Fort. It needs meticulous coordination between the government and the private sector to achieve the goal of connectivity. So let us first try to understand the question, then I'll come to how to write the, then I'll come to the content on how to write it. So it demands that meticulous coordination is needed between whom? Between the government and the private sector to achieve the goal of connectivity. Discuss. Again, pour in all you know about Gati Shakti. So what is Gati Shakti? It was announced on this date, and this Gati Shakti actually subsumes a very important project, the National Infrastructure Pipeline. This subsumes it. National Infrastructure pipeline which was announced in 2019. Now, what else Gati Shakti does apart from subsuming it? That it's a digital portal which connects 16 ministries. Digital portal to connect 16 ministries related to work that they do for infrastructure. Okay, so that it becomes a bit more streamlined. Okay, that is the purpose of this Gati Shakti. Infra-related work will be done. Now, here is the introduction of Gati Shakti. You have to write all these in 30 to 40 words, because that is not, see, do not explain Gati Shakti here. I know this was in news repeatedly. It was covering in coming in newspapers as well as covered by the electronic media. And you all being serious aspirants see these things, study these things, but that is not what has been asked. So we have to be very to the point. Let us not get carried away seeing a friendly term over here. That meticulous coordination between government and the private sector is needed to achieve the goal of connectivity. This is the intro. Now let us come to the second, that what about this meticulous coordination with private sector? So what would private sector bring? Private sector benefits. Okay. What would be the private sector benefits that would be of some help in the Gati Shakti Yojana? So here you can write here that private sector can provide with the state-of-art technology, the expertise, the professional expertise, okay, all these things you can write here. And private would also indulge in resource optimum use, because you see, private works on profit motive, and though there is nothing wrong with it, but one of the essential elements of working with private motive is to reduce the wastage, to optimize the use of your resources. So this will be one thing which would happen here. Now, the government sector. Okay, this is what private will bring with it. Now, many times what happens that a PPP project comes up, the public-private partnership project turns up. This is something which one expects from private to bring here. Now, where is the problem? That any PPP project turns up, it faces certain constraints. What are those constraints? Let us try to understand. Mostly these infrastructure related projects, because we have already seen Gati Shakti connects 16 ministries related to infrastructure work. So all these infra related infrastructure related projects, they are often caught in land acquisition. Lot of issue happens here. Okay, so that is, if private tries to do this thing on its own, the problem may get worsened. So here government should be more active. Okay, government needs to talk to the people over there for acquisition of land and everything. Now, another thing which has happened of late is the environmental related concern. Remember our first question, that it is one of the most significant provision that has happened, and no one denies that. But these environmental concerns often serve a death blow to the infrastructure projects. So what happens here? Someone will file a litigation. Now the matter goes to the court, and then the project stretches. Project has been stretched. So when the project has been stretched, the cost of project will increase manifold. Why would a private player want to do this work? He knows that there will be a litigation, the court will take a call. There are some activists who are sitting to file the PIL against the numerous examples are there. However, no need to quote them over here. So again, government needs to provide them with certain remedy. Maybe government can send its lawyer. Let the Attorney General, Solicitor General, and uh, the Additional Solicitor General, the three top legal officers of the Government of India, defend this PPP project for the private counterpart in a court of law. Let them defend it. Okay. So government would assure them. This is the coordination that we are talking about. That we need meticulous coordination here. Otherwise, all these things fall flat. Now, at times, what happens that these projects require huge finance. So, public-private, this needs huge funds. So, many times the banking and financial institutions, are reluctant to lend. They are reluctant to lend because they fear that this lending may turn into NPAs. Here the government can provide the help. What kind of help? Government can say that if at all such a thing happen, then I'll be the credit guarantee. I'll serve as the credit guarantee. If they default, I'm ready to pay because I am the partner here. So that will allay the fears of these banking and financial institutions regarding the piling up of the NPAs that is often seen. Now, at times what happens that there is a lack of cooperation. Lack of cooperation between the government and the private. We cannot point out to the reason, but at times ego would not be the right word to use here, but that's actually what happens. So you can say that don't use ego, but say different orientation. Okay. Different orientation because of the different backgrounds that they work into. So this needs to be confronted. This needs to be done away with. Also, there is an additional concern that private may not be willing to operate in such a project, in such an infrastructure project. Like what if the remuneration is less? What if the scale of operations are less? Scale of operations are less. So there will be a question mark for these people. Suppose government says that Udan Yojana, you already know that government wants to connect even tier 2 cities through the aircrafts. That's fine, that's very fine. But when the private player is involved, he would certainly check what is the number of aircrafts that operate daily. If it is below a minimum threshold, he will develop apprehensions. That why should I go for this project which will not even give me my required return on investment? So here the government needs to make it very clear. Okay, the clarity is needed on the part of the government that holistically this project will be good for all of us. So there should be a feasibility study. Okay, government plus private must go for feasibility study and then go ahead with the project that is there. So this is how you can answer this question. That would be the full solution to this question. So just remember, do not go on explaining the provisions of Gati Shakti. You just need to introduce it in maximum 40 words announced by the PM, merges, digital platform, 16 ministries, infrastructure. That's it, 40 words, not more than that. Change the paragraph. Talk about the meticulous coordination. What is that the private brings? Private brings efficiency, technology, state-of-art machinery, all these things. And this is where the coordination is needed, because at times these projects are turning out to, it might backfire if this coordination is not present there. So this is all what you have to write here. Now coming to the 7th question, the right of persons with disabilities Act 2016 remains only a legal document. So a statute here, a law has been quoted. This is the law. The Right of Person with Disabilities Act, it was passed in 2016, remains only a legal document without intense sensitization of the government functionaries and citizens. So sensitization of two entities, the government functionaries as well as the citizen comment. Now, of course, this act was passed and there is a constitutional mandate here also. We'll search for it. We can start with Article 14, the right to equality. Right to equality does not discriminate between any person based on physical ability. Now there is Article 38, you can also write here. Article 38 says that government must strive for a social order which would promote public welfare. No need to explain these provisions, just write it, that there is a constitutional backing in the form of these respective articles. Now Article 41 provides right to work, education and public assistance for person with right to work, education, work and public assistance for persons with disability. This one, you know, equality. So we have 3 constitutional provisions here. 2 from the DPSP, 1 from the fundamental rights. Now provisions are there. The act was passed in 2016. The act was passed because India is a party to UNCRPD. UNCRPD. This stands for United Nations Convention on Rights of Person with Disabilities. I repeat, United Nations Conventions of Right to Person with Disability. India is a party to it. After signing it, India passed this law. So Constitution also mentions it, a UN convention also mentions it, and we have passed the law as well. This is your introduction. Now the thing which is missing, the intense sensitization of government functionaries and the citizens. So let us start with government functionaries and let us quote what the Supreme Court said. Supreme Court said that government is not sensitized to people with disabilities, and there was this national platform for right to of disabled case. What happened, there are many such cases. One comes to my mind. There was a guy who cleared UPSC. He became IAS officer. He was visually impaired, blind. So his appointment was not happening. Now, no less than the Prime Minister of India had to intervene. Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister of India at that time. So it was at the behest of PM that he finally got his appointment. So see, someone who is able to clear the IAS still not getting appointment, which means Supreme Court is correct that government is not sensitized with the PWD, like persons with disabilities. Now another thing is which reflects the same thing, that's this sensitization on the government part is missing, that less budgetary allocation. So successful budgets have lowered the amount. Currently it is somewhere around 0.01% of GDP. So this should be progressively increased, not gradually decreased, which means maybe government is not looking into it the way they should look. Next thing is that you can add here that during the COVID, during the COVID-19, this epidemic and the resultant lockdown, there were no specific provisions for persons with disability. This was missing. There should be one. Okay, there should have been one, that everyone, government was talking about the poor, the vulnerables. But what about people who are having some kind of disabilities? So this thing was missing. So yes, we can say that it is often the courts who have said this. Budget is not there. During COVID, there was no specific provision. And after this, you can move to the citizen part, where you can say that people with disabilities are often seen with, there is a certain social stigma that is attached to them. Okay. Instead of viewing these people with empathy, people have their own superstitious belief that someone is handicapped, someone is disabled because of, and there comes the superstition. So these needs to be done away with. Now, at times our educational institutions, both these points you can write, that our schools and colleges, they do not, they are not sensitized enough. Okay, that is why what happens, the person with disability will feel more alienated in his or her old school or college, which is quite a sad state of affairs here. So this all we can write here. The entire process, like it is the concerned government department or the ministry which looks into it, that should be more approachable for persons with disabilities. Like, where will we go when our rights are infringed upon? You know the answer. Article 32, Supreme Court, 226, High Courts. Where will a person go? A person with disability who is denied what rightfully belongs to him or her, he will go to the concerned ministry, social justice, or the relevant department, but that needs to be more approachable. He will go there, he will not be able to meet. So let us make it more approachable by the use of technology. He must be able to launch a complaint. There should be grievance redressal mechanism for this. So all these things you can very well mention here. And the need of the hour is to sensitize our both government as well as citizens. See, law was passed long back. Law was passed in 16 itself. Still we are questioning the sensitization of the government, which means something more needs to be done. So merely a statute, you can write this in the conclusion, merely a statute will not solve the issue, will not solve the problem. We need to create more awareness. Okay. Create more awareness so that people start viewing people with disability with empathy. Don't write sympathy, empathy. Okay. And allay the fears. Allay fears of people with disability and all these superstition. That's why we need this more awareness. This is how you write this answer question. Now the next one, reforming the government delivery system through the direct benefit transfer scheme is a progressive step. So it's a good thing, but it has its limitations. So there is a question mark to comment. Your views are needed. So you know what is DBT? It has been making news all the while. The matter is also has gone to the Supreme Court regarding all that. freebie stuff and all. So first you start explaining very briefly what is DBT. What actually is DBT, that you start explaining. And again, 30 to 40 words, not more than that, that transferring the subsidy or the government amount that the government is giving to the poor, the vulnerable, to the beneficiary. So transfer of amount to the beneficiary. And you can give some examples. There are so many examples, you must be remembering them. The Ujjwala Yojana, the LPG, the PM Kisan benefit. Okay, few you can write, no need to write all of them. If you combine the center as well as the state's scheme, then more than a dozen such schemes will come. Okay, so here you can write here. Now it's a progressive step. Why it is a progressive step? Because it checks the leakage of funds, and then this jam trinity, Jandhan, Aadhaar and mobile, you all know it. So because of jam, several ghost beneficiaries have been eradicated. They have been eradicated. So this is benefiting the real intended beneficiary. Okay, it is benefiting the real intended beneficiary. Now, what are the issues that are happening? Because this question is not about the utility of DBT. Question actually assumes it. Okay, that it's a progressive step, it says. So confine all these things in 55 words and then move to the second paragraph. It has its limitations. What is the limitation of direct benefit transfer? That you are giving them for welfare, but they can use it. Welfare is a subjective term, so what is welfare for government might not be welfare for them. Their welfare differs. So can be used for gambling, for alcohol. Ho gaya welfare. Okay, that may happen. That misappropriation, not exactly misappropriation, because it is going into the hands of the one who needs it, but they are wasting it on these things. So is DBT working? We can also kind of question it. Now, what about the migrant workers? The mobile workers who are moving from one place to the other. They can't avail the benefits. They won't be able to avail the benefits because they are moving, they do not have the required document. That is why. Again, we have mentioned in example PM Kisan. I asked you to write PM Kisan and Ujjwala in the exam, in the initial definition of DBT itself when you go to the second line, because you will point out the demerit here. It is not available. The entitlement, the help, the DBT cash is not available to a landless farmer. So what about that farmer who is a very small marginal one? He will be deprived of the benefits of PM Kisan. So usually the comparatively well-off farmers will kind of progress from it. So these are the things. Now let us try to, this is the socio-political stuff. Now let us think economically also, because that is what has been this was in news, these things were in news. It can widen your revenue deficit. I'm sure you guys know about these things. Of course you do. See, it is not creating, it is, what is DBT? It is actually a revenue expenditure. It is not a capital expenditure. Okay, DBT at best is a revenue expenditure. Not capital expenditure, which means no assets are created. You can write here, no tangible or durable assets are created. You make a bridge, it will start benefiting people. You make infrastructure, so these things stay. But when you give someone money to survive or to live a better life, uh, it is actually a revenue side expenditure. It will not lead to something immediate. There will not be an income against it. So capital expenditure in long term may be remunerative, but revenue expenditure might not be. That is how it goes. So there will be no tangible asset, so which means it will keep on going. Okay, it will keep on going. And often what happens, there's this term you can use, populism. Populism, lok lubhavan in Hindi we call it. So which sounds good to the ears, but it's not actually. It's like sweet. Sweet, sweets has the sweets. I'm talking about the mithais. It tastes very good, but there are health repercussions that might happen. So populism because of vote bank politics. So the easiest thing to do for a party or a politician to win is to announce a lot of freebies, that I am opening the CFI or the Consolidated Fund of State, take as much as you can, and then the one who announces more will win. So that's what this matter is being looked into. The freebies. Prime Minister talked about the revenue culture. So again, which revenue is good and which one is bad? Because center itself is giving so much of freebies. The state governments are also giving freebies. So there has to be an all-party consensus on checking this vote bank politics. Recently, few months back, the joint secretaries had a meeting with the Prime Minister of India. Joint secretaries are senior IAS officers, and they warned the Prime Minister, they expressed their concern that some states, if we look at their finances, they might go the Sri Lanka way, which means they might financially bust. Okay, what does that tell us? That tells us that this populism will not survive for long. We need to draw the line. We need to fix a threshold that, okay, for health, for education, we can give this. But for everything, for tabs, governments are giving freebies, distributing tabs. Of course, there is a utility. I'm not denying that. But somewhere the line has to be drawn. And what are the precedents that we are sitting here? What is the behavioral change that will come up? It can make people complacent without any work. Okay, people will turn complacent, and it's not a good thing. It is a disastrous thing when young men and women are looking for freebies and are unwilling to work. So our workforce will reduce. Okay, our workforce will reduce. This will set a very bad habit. It's not a good thing actually when you are making the entire population dependent. Instead, teach them certain skills. It's like saying, the old saying which says that give a person a fish every day to eat and teach him how to catch a fish. What will benefit him more is when you teach him how to catch a fish. Okay, so impart certain skills so that the person can earn a livelihood instead of making him completely dependent on the freebies of the state. Dependent on freebies. Not a good thing. That would be counterproductive, both physically, psychologically, and there might be social implications as well. So another thing you can say that it does not cover every vulnerable section. So some vulnerable sections are still left out. Okay, government claims to have touched the vulnerable sections, but they too are left out, like the intersex or the transgenders, you can say. Okay, they have been left out. There is no such provision for them. The destitute women and the prostitutes, they are also left out. They have to always, they are kind of having a tough life because they don't have an option. They don't have anything. their children are suffering. So maybe these sections need to be included. These are the various concerns of DBT. Different dimensions we have added. First thing is that it will not, what will it do? It will, migrant workers having no documents will be left out. PM Kisan, someone who is not having access to land, landless labor will be left out. And cash has been dispersed. Cash went to the intended beneficiary. What if he squatters it? Like you get money from your house, your family, I hope, for staying here and preparing, but instead you start watching movies and doing things instead of studying. So you are also same. I'm drawing this analogy just to prove that what will happen, the fund will go there, it will get in the hands of the person who deserves it, but he might waste it. So how do we watch it? How do we regulate it? Government cannot come in every poor household place and say that yes, now I have given you money, now utilize for what I want you to. So there is this issue. On all these points are there. So yes, there is a limitation too. No one can deny this. This is what our question is. And all these points you can just sum up one after the other. That will be more than sufficient here. Now moving on to the next question. Now here comes the international relations. India is an age-old friend of Sri Lanka. From Treta Yuga, I guess. Okay. So discuss India's role in the recent crisis in Lanka in light of the preceding statement. So try to understand, discuss, again, pour in your heart, India's role in the recent crisis in Lanka in the light of the preceding statement. So it will not be a general statement. It will not be a general answer because this factor has to be considered. India being an age-old friend of Sri Lanka. So you can start like this, that both countries, both India and Sri Lanka share, you can write this, these are keywords which we use in IR, civilizational links, and you can quote Ramayana here, from Ramayana times. Okay. Then from here you can also say civilizational links is not only confined to Ramayana and Hinduism, but to Buddhism as well. Buddhism as well. Then you can add here the shared ethnicity. Shared ethnicity, the sheer number of Tamils living there, even some Sinhalese. You know, there are two main groups there. So they have certain roots which are found in India. Now, this relation precedes history. Okay, because we are talking about the mythological times of Ramayana. So it precedes history. That's why we are saying it shares a civilizational linkage. There is a civilizational linkage, just like we have with Nepal also. So here also we have this. Now you can write here that more often there has been, because question says that in the light of preceding statement, age-old friend. So this will be your first para. 30 words, 30 to 35, not more than that. Change the paragraph. Now, how India has been an age-old friend, let us try to elaborate it. Again, you don't have much words here, 60 to 70 words. Like you can say that during the crisis that was happening in Sri Lanka, I'm talking about the LTTE issue. Okay, the country was facing a civil war. What India did? India did the Rajiv Jayawardene Accord. Now, here you can say that India went ahead and tried to implement this accord. It was in 1987 and it had this 13th amendment followed. As a result of this accord, the 13th amendment to the Sri Lankan constitution followed. Now, this was a very conciliatory approach. Okay. This was like, okay, let us mend our ways, whatever problems are there, realize that you are one people, both Sinhalese and Tamils, live peacefully. So this accord had this clause that there will be provincial councils. Okay, this provincial councils will be created even in the Sinhali majority. Sinhalese majority areas which will have power of self-governance. Self-government will be there. A unique model was presented. Now, India often complains that this 13th Amendment has not been implemented in letter and spirit. However, we are not going to write that. Why? Because we are stressing that India is an age-old friend. So here is what an age-old friend would do. When you are not having best of the times, the age-old friend comes, works out an accord, instructs you to do, not instructs, but cooperates with you to do what is right, and so that tension is diffused. Okay, we can write all these things. Now, recent crisis. Now, no need to go into why recent crisis has happened, but I can tell you that recent crisis, yeah, this is a result of COVID, which killed people also, and tourism. Tourism in Sri Lanka, which adversely impacted the economy. Sri Lanka's economy, tourism is was one of the largest revenue generator. So here comes COVID, gone. Now, the president of Sri Lanka wanted organic agri. So he was being advised by some famous organic enthusiasts and environmentalists. But these things do not happen, should be avoided when there is a pandemic surrounding the world. One of the largest contributor to the GDP has already been undone. No one is coming for tourism. There is a lockdown, right? So here, when organic agriculture is being introduced, the production will dip. When you shift pattern radically, that's why these things are done gradually, and more so amidst COVID. So what will happen? Your production would dip. Here is a food crisis, and then you already have debts from many countries. You know which country I'm talking about. No need to mention that name. So all these things resulted in high fuel prices, high fuel, food, the unemployment is rising. Our employment is, so here comes the age-old friend. Now what age-old friend did? We have extended a line of credit. That was $1 billion US, which is not a small amount. $1 billion credit line India has given to the Sri Lanka, and right thing to do. Another thing we have done is we have deferred loan payments to the magnitude of 500 millions. Okay, again quite a large amount. India has also gone for 400 million of the currency swap. So all these things would help the island country of Sri Lanka. Okay, how it will help? It will give them the much needed breathing space. So yes, traditionally we have done it. Again we are doing it. So yes, we are helping the Lankans, and you can conclude this by writing that India has always stood it by its neighbors. India is following its neighborhood first policy. Okay. Pursuing its neighborhood first policy. And we want a stable, prosperous Sri Lanka, which is also in the interest of India. See, if stability is not there, you don't have to write this, but try to understand. If stability is not there, again poverty comes, what will happen? A revival of LTTE. How? What do people do when they have nothing to do? They start talking about Azadi. They want autonomy, that this government is not looking after us. So, Pak Strait, you must have seen that water body between India and Lanka. So, there are certain fishery concerns. Both countries, like Sri Lanka, often catches our fishermen. They release them also. But one of the reasons Sri Lanka says that if our fishermen are not getting fishes here because Indian fishermen are coming with mechanized boats and better nets and they carry on all the fishes, this is very close to Jaffna, Park Strait. Jaffna was a hot center for the LTT activities. What will happen? These unemployed, these very poor people will revive the LTT. So stability is needed, prosperity is needed, else again that separatist element, the insurgency might get revived. You don't have to write this, but India is pursuing its neighborhood first policy and we want a stable, prosperous Sri Lanka, which is in the interest of India as well, and for peace and for maintaining a more vibrant Indian Ocean region. That is it. Complete this is. All these things you mention one by one is all what is needed here. Now, moving on with the next. BIMSTEC is a parallel organization like the SAARC. This question was asked in Parliament. Same question. In March 2020, the MOSEAM, Mr. V. Muralidharan, yes, he was asked this question in March 2020. The question was something, one of the MPs asked him, the minister, that is BIMSTEC an alternative to SAARC? So he replied that no, both have separate functions to perform. They both are separate regional organization. This was MOSEAM in Rajya Sabha. This happened in 2020. In fact, the first question, that environment wala stuff, that constitutionalization of it has been the environment law, Supreme Court, which we discussed the first question. It was there in Indian Law Journal. Indian Law Journal of 2005. Does not mean you have to read Indian Law Journal, more of that 2005 issue, because of late these things are still happening. The environmental concern for court is not a new thing. It started with that case which I told you, the earlier one, the 1970s one. And after that, court has turned into a very proactive mode. So whatever in and around is making news and is related to your static portion is important for your exam. You see something happening, environment becoming a part of fundamental rights. You know what is fundamental rights. You know how important environment is. Expect a question on this. You cannot just read everything, the old sources, and come up with the model answer. That's not how it works. Work on your theoretical portion. Start reading current affairs and newspapers in a more careful way. Deduce the important points. This is the only way. And of course, appear for the test. Many of our MGP questions have been repeated, not word by word, but yeah, the essence would be same here. So BIMSTEC is not a parallel organization. This was what the minister said here. And just this is an add-on information. You may skip it, that no, you need not quote the minister. But yeah, if somewhere you can quote it. So both have very, very contrasting objectives. What is SAARC? SAARC is 8 countries are here. What for these 8 countries are here? What are they doing here? This is an economic political organization of 8 which countries? South Asian countries. Now BIMSTEC clearly says that we connect South Asia to Southeast Asia. Okay, so you see the ambit of BIMSTEC is wider than that of SAARC. Now SAARC says we promote welfare of people in our region. Why would a regional organization come up? Of course, to benefit its people, accelerate the economic growth, social development, progress, cultural development, all these good things, strengthen the collective self-reliance of these 8 South Asian countries. SAARC has this mandate, and enhance the mutual trust, work on the cooperation part with each other. Now, BIMSTEC has 5 South Asian countries and 5 South Asian countries and 2 Southeast Asian countries in BIMSTEC. Now, what is similarity? Because the question asks similarities as well. So let us see the similarities first. That both matlab SAARC and BIMSTEC, they talk about cooperation. Which cooperation? Economic plus political. Yes, both of them talk about it. What else do they talk about? They both talk about building mutual trust. Let there be more mutual trust among the BIMSTEC countries as well as the SAARC countries, and there be more cooperation. So this is something both BIMSTEC and SAARC are clear on. This is your similarity, because see, both things have been asked. Now the dissimilarities. What are the dissimilar components of both SAARC and BIMSTEC? So as I told you earlier, that BIMSTEC is actually a gap between Southeast Asia and South Asia. BIMSTEC is a bridging that gap, bridge between Southeast Asia and South Asia, which SAARC is not. Okay, SAARC isn't. SAARC is confined to only this South Asia. Okay, SAARC is not. Now, what else can you write here? That SAARC is purely a regional alliance, but BIMSTEC is an intra-regional alliance. SAARC is purely regional. BIMSTEC is intra-regional. See, 2 reasons are here: Southeast Asia and South Asia. Here you have only South Asia. What is another dissimilarity? That this you have to understand, that SAARC faces a power asymmetry. Now let me explain it. That in SAARC what happens, the sheer size of India, the sheer size of the Indian economy, the defense budget and the GDP, 5th largest, actually more appropriate to say 3rd largest on the PPP. But yeah, either ways we are very big, biggest in SAARC. So India has this asymmetrical size of population, economy, GDP, growth, all these things. So this creates apprehensions for other SAARC members. Now in BIMSTEC you have another power. India of course is there, Thailand too is there. So there are 2 poles. So less power asymmetry. Very important point, you must mention this point. There is less power asymmetry, and the trade potential of BIMSTEC any day is greater than that of SAARC. Okay, so BIMSTEC trade potential any day greater than that of SAARC. We have answered till here. See, a 150 word question for 10 marks has 3 parts. So you have to be very to the point. Satik likhna hoga. How do you write this? Similarities 3 points. Dissimilarities, 3 points. 1, 2, 3. How would you start it? BIMSTEC is a parallel organization? No, it is not, because both organizations have the different mandates. Both are different regional groupings. And you can quote if you want the foreign minister, the MOS EAM also said the same in the Rajya Sabha in 2020. This will give, more weightage to your answer. The government itself is clarifying what your question is asking. That is it. And that too in the parliament. In parliament you cannot say things which are not true. Privilege motion aa jayega. So how are Indian foreign policy objectives realized? Now here is the third question. Indian foreign policy forming this new organization. So which new organization are we talking about? This is the new. You don't have to mention how SAARC and BIMSTEC are realizing India's foreign policy, because the question is about BIMSTEC and is it parallel to SAARC? How are they both are similar or not so similar? And because BIMSTEC is a late development, BIMSTEC happened in 90s, SAARC happened in 60s itself. Okay, so here you have to say what are the things that serves India foreign policy. So here you can write this Act East policy of India, the South cooperation. There India will work on. Okay, these are declared foreign policy objectives of India. Now India also wants to develop its northeastern part, northeast of India. The development of northeast. If you have studied Act East, you know how northeast matters in the Act East. So northeast development will also be served through our foreign policy. Very important point this is. And you see the growing energy needs of India. The growing energy needs of India can be fulfilled through the cooperation in BIMSTEC. Okay, it can be addressed here. Now India wants a very free Indian Ocean region. Okay, free rule based. Let rule based कहने का मतलब समझ गए होंगे आप किसकी तरफ है, but उनका नाम नहीं लिखेंगे. Rule based means all countries must abide with those rules. Let there be, I can write this like this, no hegemon. No need to write the name of the hegemon here. Okay, rule based Indian Ocean region. Okay, for that BIMSTEC becomes very, very important. We want this Indian Ocean region to be very rule based. Trade and security must carry on like it should have been, like it should always happen in a rule based order. Thank you. Next thing that you can add here is that India's focus on Indo-Pacific. India's focus of Indo-Pacific, which is also a priority area for Quad. You all know what is Quad. How inevitably it is linked with foreign policy. So BIMSTEC also provides you an auxiliary for the Quad and a kind of helping hand for Quad. So these are the things that you write here. Complete answer. Please try to understand that you cannot just go on writing and writing. I told you, if you exceed the word limit, the person who is checking your answer develops a dislike for your answer. You need to follow rule based. Okay, you need to stick to the rules. So please choose your words very carefully. It is not. Why? Because both of them have different mandates. And never answer in first person. I read some answers that I don't think. Your opinion, your personal opinion is not sought here. What is happening here, you need to just state the obvious. So avoid writing your answer in first person. I think, in my personal opinion, no, I don't think. No, that's not how you write your answers in UPSC. So do you think BIMSTEC is, as both organizations have their respective different mandates, both have been formed for specific purposes, as the minister also stated in the Rajya Sabha. That is why they are not parallel organizations. However, there are certain similarities, point 1, point 2, point 3. But there are certain dissimilarities, point 1, point 2, point 3. Then Indian foreign policy objectives are served. That's it, nothing more. I know it's a challenge to confine all these things in 150 words. Take 25 words extra, but not more than that. And do not do this very often. Now here comes the 250 words and 50 marks questions. The procedure to decide the disputes arising out of the election of a member of parliament or state legislature. So we are asking about MPs, MLAs, MLCs. Okay, under the RPA 1951, the ROPA 1951, first part, the procedure to decide. So under what procedure, when there is a dispute regarding their election, will be done under this act? What are the grounds on which the election of any returned candidate may be declared void? So returned, you know, nirvachit. Returned here means nirvachit, elected. Okay. The grounds on which the election of any returned candidate may be declared void. Under what grounds his election, he has been elected, but then something has happened which should not have happened, can be declared void. Now, what remedies available to the aggrieved person against the decision? Refer to the case laws. Of course, it's a kind of detailed question is here, and we have sufficient points to write the same. Now, on what grounds a person can be declared? So, any dispute decided by, you see here, Supreme Court and High Courts have the jurisdiction, okay, to decide the disputes. Supreme Court and High Courts have the jurisdiction to decide these disputes, and within 45 days of the election. So whenever election has happened, within the 45 days, a person can approach. Now, what is the procedure you see here? Procedure here is that this is the procedure that you need to approach the highest court or the Supreme High Court within the 45 days of that this election. Now, it says grounds on which a election of any returned candidate can be declared void. So this requires a bit more detailed. A bit more detail is needed here. Grounds on which. Again, you know the grounds. If not, I'll write it here. There is this office of profit case. Under the office of profit, a person can be declared, his election can be declared void. Another thing you can, what all things are there, like if the person engages in any derogatory practices against women, then also he can be disqualified even after he's he has been elected. And then you have this, of course, bribe and corruption issues are always there. If any bribes or corruption cases, if they come up, a person can be disqualified. Now, here you have been asked to give certain case laws also. So the recent one is your Prem Singh Tamang case. Sikkim. What happened? He was disqualified. He was disqualified under that Prevention of Corruption Act. He was disqualified under Prevention of Corruption Act. Okay. Now, there was an amendment to this law. There was an amendment to this law, and EC, the Election Commission, actually reinstated him. So this act was amended. EC reinstated him. Here is the case law. So where we have written that jurisdiction lies in High Court and Supreme Court, there you can add EC as well, because EC also had, in fact in this case, EC was the one who did that. So it is the Supreme Court, High Courts as well as the EC after this amendment. And of course for other things also EC can take a call. Now what is remedy available? Person can move to the court, person can approach the Election Commission. So how do you start it? These are the content. How do you start it actually? So you can give, you can start by giving a formal, a kind of brief introduction to the RPA Act of 1951, that this conducts the actual process of the election. You can say that this conducts the actual process of the election, and the dispute arising out of any such process is to be reported to the judiciary or to the Election Commission. Then you can go on writing the grounds on which, here are the grounds, you can explain these grounds, and remedy available, here is the remedy, you can mention this case law. This is what you have to do here. If you are running short on content, you can explain this a bit more. RPA Act you can explain in 50 words. Anyways, it will, like all these provisions, if you go on elaborating, it will go on till 250 words. Now the next one, the essential condition for the exercise of legislative powers by the governor. So here the legislative power of the governors has been asked, which refers to the ordinance making power. Ordinance making power, your article 212. Okay. 213 actually, not 2. 213. Ordinance making power has been asked here. Now, here, when can governor do that? And discuss the legality of repromulgation of ordinance without placing them before the legislature. So there is a court judgment here which we'll write. Now, under what case he can promulgate the ordinance? Assembly not in session. You can write here that ordinance making power is not a parallel law making power. So governor or the president can promulgate an ordinance only when the legislature, state legislature or parliament are not in session. President cannot do it when parliament is in session. Governor cannot do it when state legislature is in session. When can they do that? Only when assembly is. So this is about governor. We will stick with the assembly. We will not go with the parliament here. Not needed actually. Now what else will you write here? That on he can promulgate ordinances on which topics? He can promulgate ordinances on topics on which state legislature can legislate. Here also, instead of assembly, better word to write it state legislature, because you know some states have bicameral structure. So prefer writing, question also says legislature only. So prefer writing legislature instead of assembly. Legislature matlab Vidhan Parishad plus Vidhan Sabha. The Legislative Council plus Legislative Assembly. So when will he do it? First part has been answered here, that discuss the essential condition for exercise of legislative power when assembly is not in session. Article 213 enables the governor to pass the ordinance, promulgate the ordinance. And can he do it on his own? No, he will do it only on advice of State Council of Ministers headed by the Chief Minister. Governor, it's not a discretionary power. Okay, it is President has no discretionary power regarding the ordinance. Governor has no discretionary power regarding the ordinance. Of course, governor's discretionary power is more than that of President, but not here. Both do not have discretionary powers here. They will do it only on the advice of the executive. So this is what you will do. Now another thing, what you can write here, that it's not a parallel lawmaking power, as I told you, and it's not till eternity. There is a duration of it. So technically speaking, it is 6 months plus 6 weeks life of an ordinance. Okay, 6 months plus 6 weeks. So within this period, the ordinance has to turn into a law, else it will collapse, it will lapse, and it needs to be put before the assembly before 6 months and 6 weeks, which means technically it is 7.5 months. Now this answers our first part. Elaborately we have answered it. Nothing more is actually needed here. Now the legality of repromulgation, here comes the other part, the legality of repromulgation of the ordinance. So two landmark judgments are here. I am sure you have studied about it. The DC Wadhwa case. What happened in DC Wadhwa case? It was in 1987. The court clearly mentioned that any effort to pass or promulgate the ordinance without an effort to place it before the state legislature is a violation of the constitution. So repeated ordinance are a violation, because what is happening, you are skipping the legislative route, you are taking the ordinance route. That is not something which the courts liked in this DC Wadhwa case. Now there is another judgment, the Krishna Kumar Singh case. This was in 2017. So one is your DC Wadhwa, this is your 1987. Then you have the Krishna Kumar Singh. This was in 2017, where the court expressly held this, that a repromulgation of ordinance without placing them before legislature is a fraud on the constitution. This is what the court said, that it is a fraud on constitution. Okay, so the position of Supreme Court is very, very clear. Court is not liking it, and you know the reasons why court is not liking it, because lawmaking is the exclusive domain of the legislature. Yes, temporarily executive can exercise that domain, okay, can actually exercise its power, but that is not a parallel power. Suppose some emergency occurs, house is not in session, CM can request the governor to promulgate an ordinance. But repeatedly doing the same thing, it means that you do not have belief in the parliamentary system. So this is subversion of parliamentary system and democracy. That's why court used such strong words over here. So this is legality of repromulgation as held in both these cases. You have to mention both these cases, what the court said here, then your answer would be complete. So this is how you have to write this. Please remember these two cases here. And there are numerous others. Bihar Patna High Court was very angry. They even 20 years an ordinance was passed by the Bihar government. High Court said that is this an ordinance Raj? So there are such cases, but no need to mention all. These two are the landmark ones. Now, national political parties in India favor centralization. The regional parties are in favor of state autonomy. A very good question, but you have to write this very carefully, because one government is pitted against the other government. Now, whose sides will you take? I hope all of you who have appeared for the main exam or who are preparing for the next year, you know that you cannot take a stand very contrary to that of the government. It's not like you are always supposed to praise the government. Of course, you can go for course correction. Your wordings are such, comment is here. There are questions where critically examine is written. So when you have to critically examine something, you have to point out certain shortcomings. And yes, constructive criticism never hurts. If everything is fine, then why are we even studying these things? So that something better emerges. So, and here what I am trying to tell you, that do not take a very contrary stand from the government. Do not criticize any policy which you may think that this is not doing the much needed work, but still you have to stand by it. So here national political parties and the regional parties both are what? Both are kind of they are the one who form the governments. Okay, in some states you have state parties, the regional parties operating. So here what will be right here? Here we will start our question that yes, there are like you can write a bit about the federalism provision here, that India has what is called a quasi-federal. India has a quasi-federal structure with unitary bias, biased in the favor of center. Now, no need to explain federalism more than this. And centralizing tendencies comes from where? So centralizing tendencies, you see, you can write here that also, you know, this Jawaharlal Nehru, our first prime minister, he went to the extent of saying this in Constituent Assembly debates, that it would be injurious to the interest of country if we have a weak center. So that is why we have such unitary bias. Okay, these are the words of the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru ji, in the Constituent Assembly debates. Now, where do we see the centralizing tendencies? Where do we see the centralizing tendencies? And this is what the national parties would say. You see the office of governor, the emergency provisions. Okay, you know, the emergency provisions, how India becomes more of kind of unitary than kind of federal. And there is this article 256 through which center can issue the directives. Of late, center has been invoking this article a little too much, and कुछ ज़्यादा ही directives state को दिए जा रहे हैं. So this is also one thing. Now, another thing you can write here, centralizing tendencies, that many major policy issues, and you can write very well, the demonetization, the abrogation of 370, the passage of CAA. Regional parties could not oppose these things much. Okay, not much opposition from regional parties. Now, the opposition you saw was not from parties, it was from some groups, people-centric groups. So, you see the centralizing tendency that we are witnessing here. They met with little resistance from regional parties. These things were unilaterally done by the center. Now, inherent bias is already there. Now, why would state want autonomy? And why do states demand autonomy, the regional autonomy? Regional players or the regional parties want more state autonomy. Why so? For effective governance, because they tend to know the local conditions more, utilization of local resources. Okay, because of all these things you can write here. And what else can you say? That what we need is regional parties also have regional national aspirations. Okay, regional parties also have this national aspiration, so they also want to assert themselves on the entire India. Now, you can give another example here. You can write about the GSTC, the Goods and Service Tax Council, where the consent of states matter. You know, it is more of states, 2/3 and 1/3. Now, states are not in favor of center monitoring all those center sponsored schemes. Okay, center is monitoring the centrally sponsored schemes, which is not liked by states. So here you are supposed to comment on this statement that we saw why national parties favor centralization. We give point where Indian constitution and the parliamentary democracy exhibits centralizing tendencies. Here we are seeing why regional, on what basis the regional players say so. Because all of them have their very sound arguments. Okay, the regional parties are also having sound arguments. The center, of course, is having sound argument. We are examining the basis of their arguments. So here we'll say effective, all these points you can note here. Now, how do you conclude it? I told you, do not take a side, because you don't want to criticize the state government, you do not want to criticize the central government. So what is the way forward here? For the way forward is what Prime Minister often says, cooperative federalism. Okay, and here review the role of governor. Okay, review the role of the governor. Just have a mandate where he can specifically have some role, cannot act arbitrary or act as center agents. Now, we have a wonderful provision, that is your interstate council. Now, of late, these interstate council meetings are not happening. So, we need more meetings. More meetings to build a amicable environment between center and regional governments or parties. Okay, let us have more interstate council meeting. It's not happening right now. And another thing you can write here, a very interesting thing that has come to my mind is that empower the local self-government. So if, of course, it refers to PRIs, ULBs, panchayats and municipalities, implement recommendations of Punchi Commission. Of course, you know what was Punchi Commission. It was on center-state relations. So this should be your conclusion here. And it is a 250-word question. You can very well write all these points. What makes center national political parties favor centralization? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What makes regional parties go for state autonomy? We have seen what needs to be done. Cooperative federalism needs to be ushered in. How? Through these things. Okay, this is what you have to write here. That would be a complete answer. 14th, President of India and France are elected. Critically examine. Now see, critically examine. How do we, first we need to know the distinction, how these two people are appointed here. Now, because the question says critically examine, which means we have to offer certain suggestions here. Now, try to understand this, that in India, President of India is indirectly elected, but in France, the president is directly elected. Here you have an electoral college. You know who all sits there, the MPs and MLAs of all the states and the 2 UTs that have Vidhan Sabha. Here, the citizens vote. That's why it's direct, it is indirect. So France, what is France? France is a quasi-presidential. We are a parliamentary form. Why I'm calling it quasi-presidential? Because president is directly elected, but the council of ministers, you see, the council of minister is headed by the prime minister, and this council of minister is accountable to the parliament. So a unique, a very interesting arrangement France has. Okay, unlike India, unlike as in India also has interesting, but since we are more used to Indian form of this election, that's why it does not appear unique to us. Okay, so another thing that you can write here, that in France you have a constitutional council. Yes, here you have what is called constitutional council. It is a 9-member body who are elected for 9 years. What it does, Constitutional Council actually, it's a judicial watchdog. Constitutional Council is actually a judicial watchdog which ensures parliamentary laws conform to the French Constitution. So in India, no such provision happens, and in France you have 2 rounds of voting. In France, you have 2 rounds of voting. In India, just 1 round. 1 round of preferential voting. You know, you must have studied it. I'll just explain it here. That any candidate, who are the candidates? The MPs and MLAs in India, electoral college members. The number of votes that they will give is nothing but a choice that they will make. The number of choices will be same as the number of candidates appearing for presidential election, which means if there are 4 candidates, 4 choices. This is my first preference, this is my second, third, so on and so forth. N number of candidates, N number of preferences to be exercised by electoral college. That's not the case there. There you have a 2 round of voting. Then you have a constitutional council, a 9-member body elected for 9 years, which is a constitutional watchdog to make sure that the parliamentary laws are in accordance with the Constitution of France. So in India, indirect MPs, MLAs are form of electoral college. Proportional representation, again you can write here, proportional representation. That is why the MLA of UP has highest vote and the MLA of Delhi has relatively lower vote. MPs vote are same everywhere, and all MPs vote are greater than even the highest voting value of an MLA. So this is called proportional representation. Apart from that, you can write that preferential voting I have already written. So this is how the 2 of them differ from each other. We have explained the procedure here. Okay, we have different procedures we have explained here if you elaborate all these points. Now, critically examine. So here you have to be a little more careful, because you cannot just go berserk against the election provision of the president. Here you can say that president is the head of the state. You know this, president is the head of the state, and head of the state is indirectly elected, which means there is a contrast what democracy says. Okay, democracy means rule of the people. So why I am not being allowed to participate in my president's election? Okay, and another thing, that because of this thing, it is often believed by some analysts, earlier they used to ask such questions, now they don't ask. They say that president, you can write this, that because of this ceremonial head of the state, he is a, president is a, abhi to Singh hai, to ceremonial head. So a rubber stamp is viewed, you are not saying it, someone else is saying it, as a ceremonial head. President is often viewed as a rubber stamp. Imagine the highest kind of office being referred like this. Of course, president is not the rubber stamp. If you have studied president, you know president can do things. He can. President Pranab Mukherjee expressed his displeasure when land acquisition ordinance went. Okay, this was in 15 or 16, if my memory serves me right. He said, "You are such a strong government. Why are you promulgating ordinance on these things?" So after that, an all-party meeting was called. A social impact assessment was done on land acquisition, and then the land acquisition turned finally into a law. So even after indirectly elected, and why I'm giving this example, because president is no rubber stamp. Whatever president says or conveys has a lot of weight. Okay, so it's not like it's a rubber stamp, but some people believe this is the only criticism that can happen. And indirectly elected, maybe people can also have their choice, and a more assertive role can be exercised for the president of India. This you can write here. That is it. You cannot just go overstretching that president is this or that. So 15th we'll see Election Commission's role in light of the evolution of Model Code of Conduct. In light of the evolution of Model Code of Conduct. Let us try to understand this. First of all, what is Model Code of Conduct? This we need to understand. It is a set of guidelines to be followed during election by parties and candidates. It is not legally binding. Please write this. It is only morally binding. Okay, it is not legally binding, it is only morally binding. So what we will write here, that it is just a general conduct of election is there, and it makes sure that the election manifesto of parties do not violate the Model Code of Conduct, has no undue influence on the voters. It comes within the Model Code of Conduct that no particular party comes up with such election manifesto. What is election manifesto? The promises that candidates, parties make to the people, the voters. So do not go over the top, do not go overboard and promise things which you will not be able to deliver. So MCC के अंदर आती हैं ये चीजें. Okay, so what it does, this MCC is a general set of guidelines, and it keeps an eye on manifestos. Manifesto, just you write election manifesto. Then you can write election commission can appoint observers. Election commission can appoint observers. What do these observers do? Candidate can report an issue. Okay, candidate, person who is fighting, can report any issue to these observers. EC can also form squads, flying squads they are called. Now this will have people from various agencies. Agencies here refer to the law making, law enforcing agencies. Police and paramilitary will be there. So what they do, this is formed for checking that no party kinds of violates the procedure, okay, or tries to do things which they are not supposed to do. And there is this app also which you can mention, the e-Vigil app. E-Vigil app is very much there. You can send an audio video evidence. Audio video evidence of electoral malpractices. Electoral malpractices, and EC will immediately take a call on it. So it can book people for violation of model code of conduct. So you see how much election commission roles come into picture when model code of conduct is discussed here. So it has a role to play here. Now, first thing you will do here is, I'm telling you the structure, define what is model code of conduct, 1 line, 2 lines, here it covers. Then you will write that Article 324 mentions the office of the institution of Election Commission, a constitutional body. What is the role of Election Commission? To conduct free, fair and timely elections in India. Free, fair elections, that is enough. And then how Election Commission comes here? So here you have a this model code of conduct. Here you have an Election Commission which enforces model code of conduct. And if a person violates model code of conduct, violation of model code of conduct, then EC can take, punitive measures. What are the punitive measures? EC can cancel the candidature. EC can kind of not suspend but restrict campaignings by people. Very famous politicians have been restricted because they were violating the code of conduct. So for 1 week they were asked that they cannot make any electoral speech. Restrict campaigning and cancel candidature, disqualify a candidate. Of course, EC has a role to play here. Disqualify, not only EC, the president also comes into picture, but EC will of course do the necessary things here, will go for the primary investigations and all. So EC can disqualify. EC is supposed to keep an eye on paid news. Paid news, favoring one party. Newspapers often, news channels often canvassing for political parties as if they are political mouthpieces. So EC keeps an eye on these paid news also, both on channels and papers, the newspapers. Okay. EC keeps an eye on electoral expenditures. They are not supposed to go overboard. They are not supposed to violate that threshold of electoral expenditure. So you can keep on writing. So confine yourself to 250 words because there is so much that you can write here. So evolution of model code of conduct, of course, EC comes into picture here. That is it. All these points you can mention. Point wise you will write a very good answer here. The next thing, besides the welfare schemes, India needs deft management of inflation and employment to serve the poor and the underprivileged. So, okay, welfare schemes. Too many yojanas, okay. Poverty alleviation schemes. Welfare schemes are for the welfare of poor, vulnerable, marginalized. Avoid writing SC, ST, minorities, PWD, all. When you write poor, vulnerable, marginalized, all of them come there. Okay, they are umbrella terms. Try using umbrella terms here. Now, what it is being asked, deft management of inflation and employment to serve the poor. So, welfare schemes are all right. Okay, we are not denying it. But what else we need? We need managing inflation as well as unemployment. So, you see, you start from here that Constitution has promised socio-economic justice, where, yes, you rightly know it, in the preamble of the Indian Constitution. It has been promised there. Now, many such schemes you can write, Deen Dayal Upadhyay Antyodaya Yojana, the PM Kisan Yojana, the Manrega you can write, the loan waivers offered by the state and the center, all these things you can write. Now comes the question. So, socio-economic justice is there, and pursuing this objective of you can add DPSPs also. Create a social order, Article 39. So all these things you can write here, and all those yojanas you can write, name some schemes which I just mentioned, and then change the paragraph. Confine it to 60 to 75 words, not more than that, because the main content of your answers should be on this, how deft management of inflation and unemployment. Do not go beyond 75. 75 is the maximum that you can write here. Now comes to this deft management of what we call inflation and this unemployment. So what is this deft management? Deft management means that we need a very kind of skilled management of these things. How will it happen? And no, how it will happen is not asked. Why we need that? Why we need a deft management of inflation to serve the poor? So let us try to understand what is the problem with inflation. What is inflation? You don't have to define that. Inflation impact क्या होता है? Decreases the personal disposable income, which means you are left with little money to spend for yourself. Increases price of food items and other necessary items. Makes education out of reach. Makes health out of reach. Of course, inflation can do these things. And what will be the further impact? Try to understand. When poverty is there, education and health is not being looked into, the malnutrition will increase. Malnutrition increases. Your human development index decreases. You remain far away from sustainable development goals, not achieved. See what all inflation does. Now, unemployment. One more thing you can write here. India is so much committed to environment. This exam, paper 2 itself is an empirical evidence of it. Your first question and other questions also. So India sustainable development, and by 2070, Prime Minister said that our net zero emission, we have achieved that 40% of renewable target 9 years in advance. So India is consciously and collectively making an effort. Now, why am I telling this here? Because someone rightly said, I think it was Professor Rangnath Nakse, maybe I'm not sure about it. You can write this line that poverty is the worst pollutant. I'm not sure if I can ascribe this quotation to Professor Nakse, Professor Rangnath Nakse, but you can use it. If you don't know the person who said that, just say that poverty appears to remove this and use it as a point. That poverty is rightly called the worst pollutant because a poor person does not care. A poor person in Delhi, 3 degrees Celsius, after 3-4 months it would be December, January. Now he is not concerned what is burning when he wants to आग सेकने जब बैठा है. Whatever comes in this bottle, he will throw it there. Now try arguing with him that this is a plastic and when you put it in fire, it will lead to this combustion and pollution. He will say, get lost. I am feeling very cold. I don't have warm clothes. I am poor. So I need to provide some relief to myself. So poverty, because the lifestyle that poverty has is the lifestyle which poverty enables it, it's actually environmentally degradable. Okay, it is polluting, it is having increased cost on the environment. So ecologically also poverty is not very friendly, ecologically unfavorable. That's why you see the most of the rich countries, they are doing well. Okay, of course Bhutan is also doing well, but Bhutan has a very less population. You see the Nordic countries, the Scandinavians, okay, the poverty part is not there, and this pollution part is also not there. So there is an interrelation between these two. Now unemployment. India boasts of what is called demographic dividend. Youngest we are, of course. But if this youngest people, youngest crores of people do not find some meaningful kind of engagement, where will this young energy go? It will go for not so constructive purpose. So what will happen here? It can lead to demographic dividend if not employed. Now employment is including self-employment, which we can achieve through skill development. It will create law and order issues. So if unemployment persists for long, expect an increase in terrorism, insurgency, and Maoism. We are not saying in any way that unemployment is the only cause. Unemployment is one of the cause. Unemployment ही reason नहीं है, unemployment भी इनका reason है, जो कि आप paper 3 में पढ़ते हैं. So internal security. So terrorism will increase. You remember what Sri Lanka said? The question that we discussed in India, Sri Lanka, that if we do not get enough fishes in our waters, if Indian fishermen take it away, there will be a revival of LTTE. So it's actually true. Unemployment can lead to these things that will be very catastrophic for the society and the country. Now, what else will happen? The alcohol, gambling, all these anti-social things will increase. The crimes will increase. Okay, the crimes will increase. And because of unemployment, we will not be able to find the relevant skilled labor. Okay, you see 140 crore people, you need a person of your choice, you will start running from pillar to post. We are just too many numbers with not so required set of skills that we have. So what is happening in our country, that we are running short of skilled labor. What will we do? We will hire skilled labor from abroad. So it's not a desirable situation for a country like 140 crore, the highest demographic dividend, to hire from abroad the skilled labor. Why not skill these people? Skill them, they will get some remuneration in employment, or they will start something of their own, self-employment. So this is how welfare schemes need to go along with deft management of inflation as well as unemployment. Only then you cannot just go on providing subsidies and welfare policies. Inflation needs to be tackled. Of course, the government and the RBI will come into picture there. And the unemployment part also needs to be tackled. Now, let us move to the 17th question. Increasing dependence on donor agencies for development reduces the importance of community participation. So, donor agency here refers to the international agencies, mostly the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the IMF. We also have a US aid. They are donors. So what they do, all these donations come with terms and conditions. Okay, now that term and condition might not include the community participation. Okay, what we say here, that we want more community participation, we need democratic decentralization, we need this, we need that. We keep saying this, but India has limited indigenous resources, so we need this donor agencies. Now we need this donor agency, very fine, but what will happen? This donor agency will always exhibit a centralized approach. Okay, a top down, which India was implementing in initial years, the first few 5-year plans. Okay, so we need them, but they will not be aware of the local conditions, the local sensitivities, the local traditions and rituals. What will happen? Confrontation might result from there also. Now, development. So first thing is local practices. They will remain indifferent. Who are they? They are the donor agencies. So they are indifferent to it. So can lead to confrontation. What else can you write here? That for effective community participation, like maybe the need to consult the community. Consult community because what is development? Now, as many definitions we know, it might vary from person to person. Let me give an example. Here in Delhi, the idea of development is great infrastructure, metro, bullet trains, okay, flyovers, good roads, shopping malls, multiplexes, good food joints. Nothing wrong with it. But maybe in some other part of India, this is not the idea of development that they have. They are equally right. In Northeast, maybe they do not think development as the same way we think here in Delhi. Maybe in some other part of India, maybe in South, maybe in Western part, maybe in maybe somewhere in extreme North, Kashmir or Shimla somewhere, they might not be thinking development as others think. So development too can be subjective. So that is why consult community on what exactly is development. Okay, do not thirst your opinion. That is why this centralized approach is not needed here. Consult the government, take them into consult the locals, take them into consideration, ask them what is your idea. This is the essence of democracy. Consultative, deliberation, debates, discussions. Ask them what is your idea of development, and then go ahead with what is required. Okay, like get sensitized to the local demands, and please do not dilute their socio-cultural practices. Okay, do not dilute their socio-cultural practices also. And this will happen only when they are taken into account while the policy making happens. Now, government should get involved. When donor agencies came, government must regulate them. Governments need to regulate because government knows these things better than these donor agencies. So consultation with government has to happen here, else not desirable. Another thing is that these donor agencies can work with the local self-government, consult the PRIs, consult the Gram Sabha. Okay. If not Gram Sabha, maybe the Jila Panchayat, okay, maybe the Panchayat Samiti at the higher level. Consult these people. The idea is get your house in order. Do not just explore and do not thirst what is your idea of development on everyone. This is how you write this. 17th question. 18th one. Right of children to free and compulsory remains inadequate in promoting incentive-based system for children education without generating awareness about the importance of schooling. Analyze. Let us take a 5-minute break. I'll return after 5 minutes and I'll wrap up this entire session. We are just left with 18, 19, and 23 questions. So I'm taking a 5 minutes break. I'll come after 5 minutes and we'll see the remaining ones. Okay, we are back. So this question is about the right of children to free and compulsory education. So this RTE Act introduced Article 21A. You know these things, 86th Amendment. Okay. Now remains inadequate in promoting incentive-based system for children's education without generating awareness about the importance of schooling. So what a great question this is. Why I'm saying this? Because we often discuss this, but see where the question goes. It asks you to analyze certain things. Of course, you need to analyze it. What? That it remains inadequate. So first thing you have to do that, yes, the 6th Amendment introduced 21A. 21A means that right to education is now a fundamental right. And here, another thing you can write here, there is this Article 51AK, small k. Okay, here also right to education is mentioned. And even after this 86th Amendment, in DPSPs, 0 to 6 years, this is referred as pre-primary level. Okay, pre-primary level of education, kind of play schools. Okay, so there also efforts have to be done. So it is now in DPSP, it's a directive. This has come into part 3. This is your fundamental rights. This is your part 4, which is DPSP. And then this is your fundamental duties. So all 3 things you see here, this is how you start. That right to education has been introduced through 86th Amendment. Article 21A talks about it. And another thing you can write exactly here, that 51AK, subclause K in the fundamental duties also puts up duty on the citizens to give education to their ward. Now, what is the question? After this introduction, you come to the question. Promoting incentive-based system for children education without generating awareness about the importance of promoting. So this thing has inadequate in promoting incentive-based system for children education. So what is incentive-based system? You all study. Why do you study? Because you have an incentive. What is the incentive? That you will qualify the exam and become a civil servant. So are children coming to education after passage of RTE 2009 with the same motive that we will study and we will become something great in life, we'll do something very good? Quality of education is questionable. Okay. And importance of schooling. So we are talking about the quality, which is questionable. Right? Now, no awareness is being generated. So what we can say here, the quality is questionable. You know what happens? Sadly, we have to provide food to children so that they turn up. I'm not saying it is a bad thing that we make our children eat, but we have to bring them in school. लालच दिखा रहे हैं कि meals मिलेगा, इसलिए आ जाओ. Not the best thing to achieve education, not the best instrument maybe. So coming for food. Food is bringing children to school. And this is actually a very sad state of affairs. Primary motive should be education. But here the primary motive is that they will get meals. Okay. And let us come to the knowledge now. The knowledge. So we have certain serious concerns raised here. The knowledge that are children learning something? Children learning is doubtful. Then you can add here The faculties, teachers are absent. The students are also absent. Students too are absent. Okay. So teachers absent, students too are absent. So there's a lot of absenteeism that happens there. Now, the objective of schooling. What is the objective of schooling? Importance of schooling. So here the first small paragraph, 30-40 words about the RTE, about 51A-K, about 21A. You mentioned it, 50 words. You change the paragraph, you write these things. Quality is questionable. Incentive-based system is lacking. And because what is incentive? These things are incentive. Knowledge is not there. Teachers' absenteeism is happening. And lack of infra. See, government wants to connect higher secondary and higher level classes with Wi-Fi. But do we have the required systems over there? You can bring the laptops. You can give the tabs. What about the internet connection? And what about the electricity? So by infrastructure, I am referring to not only school buildings and other amenities available at the school campus. I'm also referring to the how the education can be bettered, electricity, internet connection, then the systems on which these things will work, and the personnel who can operate on these systems. So here everything will come here. Now the importance of schooling. What is the importance of schooling? To impart education. Not only education, quality education. Seriously missing in our government schools. Of course, there are certain aberrations. I'm not going into the aberrations. I'm confining myself here. We need to confine ourselves to what happens in most of the schools. Okay. So that is missing here. Knowledge. Then you can say livelihood skills. Then learning. See, these two are different. Of course, you get knowledge when you learn, but there is a two different process of it. Livelihood skills, learning, knowledge is missing. What else is missing? Relevant skills. I think we have mentioned. So this is the objective. Okay, this should be the objective of schooling. This is largely missing from our schools. We can move on and we can say that we are going for what is called cramming. You know what is cramming? Rote learning. Like you also have to memorize certain things for your prelims, but there is a lot other to prelims than cramming only. But here what they do, they just memorize it and done. The work is done. Does not serve the purpose. The learning is not happening. So in conclusion, you can add on this because it will be ending it on a positive note. The PM Shri schools, mentioned about them. This is a recent thing which has happening. It has been everywhere in the news, channels and papers all. So mention about it that yes, state is making an effort. And here we have another thing which may work. And why we need to, the question is that incentive-based system and children education, why it needs to be appropriately or adequately promoted, and importance of schooling needs to be emphasized because it will have a bearing on the human development. Okay. Apart from index, you can write here that we are creating human capitals. See, these children will tomorrow become adults. They will become citizens. They will become 18 above. If the base is so questionable, so tentative, so uncertain, what will they learn? It will require a whole lot of effort. See, the later you learn, the difficult it is, personally speaking. So that's why it is said, learn early. Okay, learn early. Earlier, you are free of prejudices. As you grow, lot of, people, our experiences, our everything makes us a little more rigid when we are older than what we are when we are younger. So this younger, this situation, this younger uh, avastha, what is the exact English word for it? This situation where a child is young, he needs to be very properly cared and nurtured there. Okay, so that is what is missing, and some hope is here. Uh, Implementation still remains to be seen, but let us be optimistic. And that is why we need to work on these things, because it will create human capital. This human capital will turn into good citizens, and this will progress the country. All this you need to write, and this is the structure that you need to follow for this. I2U2, grouping transform India's position in global politics. Very good question, very much in news, and a very important one as well. So direct question, which is, how will this grouping transform India position in global politics? So first we need to write a little bit of intro. A little bit of intro regarding what is I2U2. So it's a very recent thing. October 2021. So you write this, the 4 countries came together, their collaboration is called I2U2 in October 2021, primarily as an economic alliance. This is your first line. Now economics के अलावा भी बहुत कुछ हो गया है, but this was how it was stated जब आया था. Okay. Now from here on you go. What else can you write here? That primarily an economic alliance, October 2021. Yes, you can attribute this quote that I2U2 will be a game changer. Who says this? Former NSA of Israel. Okay, he said it will be a game changer. Then you say that certain analysts believe it is West Asia Quad. West Asia's Quad it has become. Okay, so this is how I2U2 is, different levels are being promoted for it. Different adjectives are assigned: game changer, West Asia's Quad, economic alliance, so on and so forth. Now this is your introduction. This introduction 50 to 70. That is it. Because the remaining 200 words will examine how India's position in global politics will be transformed through I2U2. So here what you have to do, you have to assess the way the potential of I2U2. और किसके लिए? For us, for India. So what can it happen? Let me rub it, else I'll get little space here. So let us see what all it can do to make India a more prominent player in global politics. See, India currently has a decent presence in Middle East. So how we are? Energy supplies. We are getting a lot of energy supplies, oil, you all know this, and we are providing them with lot of what kind of products they are? Consumer goods. India provides them with lot of consumer goods. What is happening? What is happening here? Trade is going good. So decent presence we have in Middle East. We are selling them this, we are purchasing oil and everything from them. Now, the Western IOR, try to understand this. This is very important. This is the Western Indian Ocean region. it is very, very important for India. Why it is so important? There are critical SLOS. SLOS, you understand, C line of communication. There are very critical C lines of communication in this route. Mention them. Suez Canal, Babel Mandeb. Okay, इसको थोड़ा यहाँ ऐसे कर लेना. Okay, so all these are there. Bab el Mandeb is there, Suez Canal is there. What are these things? These are very important geographical choke points. So Western IOR, the Western Indian Ocean region, is important for India. This side you come, critical SLOs are there. So abundant opportunities here. Okay, this provides this critical SLOS, C lines of communication, and these important geographical choke points. What do? They provide us with abundant opportunities. SLOCS, it is C lines. Maybe I should write it. C lines of communication. Okay, so it provides us with a lot of opportunity. Now India is a very reliable player in Middle East. Okay, strategically, development partner. Okay, engagements are happening close. We are coming up with very bilateral relations are very good. So after this you change the panel, right, that India has a very reliable partnership in Middle East. So we are concerned with the developmental projects. We are there in food, consumer goods, okay, services, pharma, you name it, you got it. So reliable partners. Now this I2U2 will bring India closer to whom? To 12 Middle East countries. It will bring us closer to the 12 Middle East countries. Let us have some more deep engagement. Okay, so India will have some very strong multi-phased strategic partnership. Okay, so strong partnership will emerge here. This is how you can write this. And on conclusion, you can provide something more here. You can write here that integrated food parks, there's this plan which has happened around India, integrated food parks. UAE has said this. UAE has pledged several $1 million also for this. So this will be across India. Set up under this I2U2. UAE has actually done this food park. Now what this food park will do, this will enhance crop yield, ensure food security, diversification of crops. So it will, kahin kuch ghata nahi hai, it is a very good thing. It will happen, it will reduce the food wastage, reduce food wastage and spoils and all, because we are not able to keep them the way they should be kept. That's why it leads to enormous waste and spoils also. So what is this? This is how we can use this term, because our ministry has used this term, minilateral. Dr. S. Jaishankar refers to these things. This is I2, U2 is what? This is a minilateral. Unilateral, bilateral, multilateral, minilateral, 4 of us. So that's why EU would be multilateral, ASEAN is multilateral, SAARC is multilateral, SCO, Prime Minister is there, that is multilateral. But I2, U2 is what is Prime Minister says is minilateral. So it is an ideal example how minilateral can enable India. How minilaterals can enable India to lead the world or assert itself as a more reliable and a prominent dominant player in the world politics, both from security and energy point of view. Okay, this would be a very good complete answer. And these are things which are happening. Now see, something comes very recently and UPSC frames questions around it. I mean, what else can we ask for? This tells us the importance that we have to keep, as I repeated earlier also, that we need to know the theory as well as connect with what is happening. Regular test, regular revision is a must if you want to sail through this exam. Now the last question for the day. Finally, the 20th question is here. Last question. I know it has been too long for all of you watching this, but it's for your benefit only. Clean energy is the order of the day. Describe briefly India's changing policy towards climate change in various international fora in the context of geopolitics. So again, the question assumes that clean energy is the order of the day. Okay. So you don't have to cast any aspersions on that. Why it matters from India, how India has changed its policy towards climate change. Now you start with here. Talk about your country. What comes to your mind when I say India? Populous. Of course. Developing. Why we are writing developing and populous? Why not sovereign, socialist? Because we have to answer why clean energy is the order of the day. So what will you write here? Populous, tropical and developing. Tropical. See, there is a purpose with which I am writing it. Populous, you need to cater to the demands of 140 crore. Developing, energy needs will increase. Tropical, blessed with certain resources. See how there is a purpose with which we choose our words. Okay. So tropical developing country, bigger challenge such a country will face. So that's why we have bigger challenge. With respect to the issues of climate change. तो हम नहीं बोलेंगे तो कौन बोलेगा? तो India has changed policy towards climate change because she's such a big coastal area we have. So many people, develop भी करना है, environment को भी sustain करना है. तो of course challenge is large here. So in the context of geopolitics, so see the geopolitical context, how India is asserting itself. What India is doing, India has already signed this UNFCCC, you know the full form, United Nations Framework for Convention on Climate Change. So we are signatory to it. In 2015 we signed it, and a very proactive and ambitious approach India is playing here. So India, what it is doing? A proactive and ambitious. Remember, 2017 net carbon neutral is certainly ambitious, but you know we have kind of been very performing very well here. I'll give you one more example, because we have overachieved what our commitment was at that COP21 at Paris, already meeting our 40% of power capacity from non-fossils. Now this was to be achieved by 2030. We did that in 2021. So this was one of the best news of last year. I hope you have kept a track of it. So proactive ambitious approach, the energy. Let us come to the energy demands. You know, a developing country with a huge population and a huge area will require a lot of energy. So we are not shying away, okay, by saying, but the energy intensity of India's growth, energy intensity of India's growth. Now this has to decline, and India has said it will decline. It will decline by how much? By 33 to 35% by 2030. We are keeping 2005 as the base year. Okay, so we are keeping 2005 as base year. Now what does this actually mean? This simply means that for every additional dollar of GDP, India will use less amount of energy. I should write it somewhere that for every additional dollar of GDP, India will use less energy. Dollar of GDP means the growth of GDP in terms of American dollar will use less amount of energy. Now India has also advocated what is called, you all know it, CBDR. You know what it is? Common but differentiated responsibility. Okay, I'm writing in short form. So we are committed. Like West cannot tell us that you do not do it. You have polluted for 200-300 years. You were the one who brought Renaissance, Enlightenment, and Industrial Revolution. And now that you are developed, you are asking us not to develop because we are polluting. So not everyone will have uniform responsibility. Common but differentiated responsibility we shall have. Something happens. Leave it. I'll manage. Oh, great. I touched beyond it. Okay. So what else we can write here? The net zero carbon emission, I already told you, appears to be ambitious, but going by our records, because COP21 Paris, what we said, 40% of our energy needs will be done through non-fossils. Power capacity, 40% of our power capacity will be done through non-fossils. Non-fossils by 2030, and we did it by 2021, 9 years in advance. So this is actually a great thumbs up for all of us. Now that is how you write these points. Then you will see, you will explain this, that how India is changing policy towards climate change in various international forums. So we are going in that UNFCCC, we are going in COP, we are committing to reducing our net zero carbon emission. We also advocate CBDR. Like, we are not under any pressure. Okay, this should not be seen that India was forced to act under certain pressure. We can do things despite not compromising on our development agenda and the march that we are going on with the development work. So all these things you mention, and then you concluded saying that India has always been very sensitive to environment. You can write here that it is in our way of life. You see, all these things, we are the ones who worship various forms of nature. Our religion, our culture teaches these things to us. So India has always stood by the environment. We are very, it's not like we are anthropocentric. Oh, homo mensura nahi chalta hai. Homo mensura means man is the center of everything. No, we are very environment centric. Okay, our traditionally we have been that way. So international fora, you see, India is the one who went with International Solar Alliance. So sustainable living is the order of the day. That is how India has always been, and changing policy like climate change is important. Climate change has cast aspersions on several island countries. India too has a large coastal part. So we are sensitive to the demands of climate change, and we are acting accordingly by not and simultaneously working on one development agenda also. This should be your answer here. Quote those organizations, quote what India has committed there. This will be a complete answer. And on this note, I intend to finish it. Just one word of advice to all of you who will be appearing next year. You all see how questions have been framed. In starting, I was telling you, I'll take just one more minute, don't worry. I was telling you that this assessment of the question paper. So this is how paper 2 questions are. In other papers, maybe something more from this part, something less, but here you will have always more part from polity governance and less part from IR. So 4 to 5 questions from IR, the remaining 14, 15 is an extension of polity, constitution, social justice and governance. All 4 of them are there. So first you need to understand the theory, apply it with your current affairs. Okay, and you apply it with your current affairs when you understand theory in a better way. So go ahead, work very hard, read it extensively, refer to the standard sources, and yes, keep practicing the tests once you are done with your preparation. I wish you all the best, and all the best to all of you who have appeared for the mains this year. Goodbye, take care, and keep studying. Thank you.